Hello everybody, welcome to Crafty Soup. My name is Misty and today is the Mixed Media Frenzy Hop from the Mixed Media Frenzy Facebook group. Once a month they invite all of the members to hop along if we choose and use an inspiration to create a page. So there's our inspiration. And here are the photos that I have. Now I have a brand new printer and it is misbehaving, so these photos did not print well, and as you'll see in a minute the ink is actually bleeding, so I have to do a little bit of research and see what is going wrong here. I had done some test prints previously and they were fine, so maybe I'm just missing something or I have some wrong settings somewhere or something. But in the end I'm not going to use these photos, and I have several prints here because I was trying to test all the different print settings to get the print quality to improve, both it's streaking and running and bleeding. So that was an opportunity for me to test out two different sizes of prints to see which ones I want to use for this layout. And I am going to end up going with that smaller size because it works better with the flow of this design. Despite having some icky fingerprints from those photos on my background, it's not going to be a problem because the mixed media will cover it up. And here for my embellishing, I've got Vicki Boutin's most recent holiday collection and stencils. And I've got this new craft mat for messy projects. And I am going to get going with this mixed media background. You know, those Vicki Boutin papers were actually her digital line that I print and cut myself. So just so you know, if they don't look like your normal embellishments, that's why. On the back of my Vicki Boutin mixed media paper, I am testing out some colors to see what I want to go with. And I decided to go with the lighter red pink because my embellishments are richer red. I don't want the background to compete with those elements. And then I go with a couple of blues because my photos are about a Christmas ship event that we went to. We live on a big river and every year they have an annual Christmas ship event. And so my photos were taken at night in the dark with bright ships in the background, and you cannot tell any of that from my photos. At any rate, I am using a brayer here to roll in my ink pad and then add color to my background. And then I'm also using the pad direct to the paper to add some streaky effects to the background. And then when I got this blue down, that first initial color was so bright that I tried to dab some up. But then I have this midnight blue, and these are Tim Holtz Distress. Several of them are oxides, but this darker blue is just the regular Distress. And these are all water reactive inks, which is important for my stenciling technique, which is to come. And I used that darker blue to help tone down the brighter blue, which was a little overwhelming. Now here's the water reactive bit where I flick some bigger droplets onto this background to get some ink to pull back and remove and leave some blotchy texture to the background before I move on to the stencil. And hopefully you can see a little bit of that texture coming through. And so I'm pulling out my stencil and a baby wipe for this technique, and I think this is called Stencil Ghosting. Correct me if I'm wrong. So if you hold your stencil down and rub over it with a baby wipe, you can get some of that ink to lift, and it will leave behind a ghost of the pattern. So there you go, you can see that pattern coming through. So I'm going to go ahead and move this stencil around and try to line it up because it's not a 12 by 12 stencil. I'm trying to line it up and continue the pattern, but again, because this is a nice kind of messy mixed media background, it's not going to have to be perfect as I move along here. And definitely the oxide inks are working better for this ghosting technique than the regular Distress inks were. And I think partially that is because that ink pad seems a little bit dry. And now I'm going to do a stencil stamping technique where I just ink directly to my stencil, and then I realized I do need to add a little bit of water because that ink is too dry, and then I can stamp onto my background and use a towel to dab it up because I want it to be a subtle texture, not an obvious blob of stencil there. And you can get, you know, a couple extra stampings off of the same inking and move on from there. So now I'm going to go ahead and put together this layout, and I am following the design of the page fairly closely. Of course, I have two photos here, and the design had one photo, And she did have some vertical elements of, I'm not sure if it was pattern paper or whatnot, but I'm going a little bit horizontal to help connect those two photos together, and that's going to give me a place for my title in a little bit. And I do have some of these word strips because I do believe word strips were a part of the original layout. And just throwing on some of these Christmas flowers and just little bits and pieces here. I did add some little pops of green around to help balance out the green from the flower greenery. And so I've got that added in. Before I glue everything down, I am going to give a little bit of texture and dimension to these die cuts and get them glued down so that they're not touching my photos, because I'm definitely not using those photos on this layout because of the problems that I'm having. But I want to leave space for when I get good prints that I will be able to get those on there. And then I pulled out a navy blue sticker sheet that I think was Studio Calico to get my title on there. And even though it was a very small font, in person it looks just fine and it's reading okay, even with all those other words on there. And here is what the final layout looks like. I have my journaling just along the edges at the top and bottom. And even after half an hour of making this layout, those photos are still bleeding. So I've got to figure that out. At any rate, thank you for joining me on this hop. Do remember that it is a hop and there's lots of other creators playing along. I've got a list for you in the show description so you can follow along to all of their takes on this same inspiration. If you got something helpful out of this video, please do give it a like, because that does help my channel and I appreciate it. And I hope you join me next week as we head into the new month of February and a whole new cycle of videos for you. Thanks for joining me. I'll see you next time.